You are listening to the Football Diehards podcast with your hosts, Justin Lonero and Bob Harris, sponsored by DraftKings. Sign up now using promo code DIEHARDS, DIEHARDS. Make a first-time $5 deposit, and you'll receive a free $3 ticket.
Hello and welcome to the Football Diehards podcast. I'm your host, Justin Lonero, along with my co-hosts, as always, Mr. Kyle Dvorchak and Mr. Bob Harris. Gentlemen, it is week 6 already. Just cruising by. There was some sad news this past week. There was some good news because we were able to watch the NFL, which we love. Mr. Harris, what is good in Albuquerque, New Mexico?
Working our way through all the madness. We've had some, some issues with the COVID in terms of the NFL. None here at my house because I'm all alone. There's nobody else here except the cats. But the games have been a little bit of a tricky issue, and the NFL, I gotta say to their credit, and you guys can chime in if you think, they're being very proactive in terms of, all right, this one's hosed, can it? Let's move it. Let's do it. I mean, they seem to be like getting out in front of it once it seems apparent that there's going to be issues. And also, I think, and you can disabuse me of that notion if you think I'm wrong, but also I think we're kind of learning that, we're starting to get a feel for when it's time to be worried and it's time to not be worried, right? Like you get that single positive test somewhere and you can just, you start getting a vibe from the local reporters and stuff that it may be a false positive. And oftentimes when you start getting that vibe, they're hearing things from the team and it is. Or if it's just one player and they think it's isolated, they're still okay playing the game. So the contact tracing is making a difference. And look, when it's going south, they just bail like they did with the Broncos and Patriots last week, right?
Yeah, I think one thing, like you said, it was funny, it was the Jets, right, that had a supposed positive. It felt like that was pretty quickly we were disabused of any, fears from that. One thing I think, maybe, I'm just going to ask you, because I don't exactly understand why we haven't seen more of this. I think today or yesterday, for the first time, someone, maybe it was Goodell or maybe just a league insider report, was that they actually considered adding the extra week. Why haven't we had more talk from the league considering the extra week? Because outside of that, I kind of agree. They've been on the ball with, like, when things need to get done, they've been getting them done. That's my only kind of just curiosity, is that we haven't seen the extra week. I think that would, push everything back, essentially scoot out that little 1 week break between the Super Bowl and the games prior to that. Any reason we haven't seen a lot of talk of that from the league up until this point?
Yes. I have answers about this, Justin. Don't mean to step on you and Bigfoot you like this. We'll let you in here. The plan is to go without adding that week 18, right? And they're prepared to push the Super Bowl out. They were prepared to start the season as late as October 15th and move the Super Bowl out. They've already cut out the Pro Bowl because they know this is coming. And here's the deal. Once a team that's already had an off week needs another off week, boom, here we have it. Hello, week 18, right? And that's the thing. And so we saw it in the immediate aftermath of the change, this past weekend. 8 other teams changed. They just start moving stuff around. They fire up the supercomputer over on Park Avenue and they spit out a new best case scenario schedule and they get it figured out. And we're going to have to deal with it. Honestly, I started thinking, Justin, let me ask you this. I think this is going to make the guys who are serious fantasy players a little better. The people who are paying attention, the people who are on top of their leagues, the guys that are grinding, they're going to be able to deal with this. They'll be able to pivot, find other plays, do things. And the guys that are just kind of, in it casually, they're going to end up looking at their rosters going, oh, hell, I can't play anybody.
Yeah, for certain. And it's directly affected a league that I'm heavily involved with. In fact, right before we got on, I got a lengthy text about a contingency plan and COVID backups and clarification, IR designation and stuff like that. So things are happening and they're happening quickly. They usually do, but there's so much uncertainty day to day that you really do have to have a backup plan for your players. Between injuries, I think that some of the training went to the back burner, unfortunately, because of this virtual world we're in. So we're seeing more injuries. But, there's one thing, and you said this months ago, Bob, before the season started, you said that there's going to be an NFL season. I think there was a template with Major League Baseball and NBA, and again, a contingency plan. So if the shit hits the fan, they're ready to roll. They don't have to worry about fans and issuing tickets. So that's that. They tell the TV crews, hey, be on standby, like they said, and get ready to roll Monday or Tuesday, and just, they're acting quickly, they're acting accordingly, and they're acting safely. And I think and we mentioned this last week, I mean, if you're going to be a bonehead, there should be heavy ramifications attached to that, and this will prohibit other people from being negligent.
The cynic in me wants to say this has nothing to do with anybody's health. It has it's the financial well-being of all involved, and to a degree that's probably true. But also they do seem to be making a legitimate effort. They've ramped up the protocols. Today we heard about the Panthers. Went into the higher phase of protocols that they have established if there's contact. This was a case similar to what we saw with the Vikings a couple weeks back when the Titans were there. The Vikings had to go and do a little extra protocols, daily point of care testing. We saw that with the Carolina Panthers on Wednesday because one of the Falcons players who wasn't on the field much tested positive and went on the reserve COVID list. So they really do seem to be being proactive. Their ability to contact trace. Again, I'm thinking that, the actual real world is going to learn some things from what the NFL is learning. I mean, this is kind of an experimental thing for all of us still. And the NFL's ability to track where people are, and it's possible even the medical people are going to learn some things about the spread of the disease based on the fact that, look, you have a guy on the field and he's playing against a guy and that guy doesn't get COVID. Why would that be? They're playing together for a whole game. And I mean, it's kind of, maybe we're going to learn that, you have to have close contact for an extended period. It's just not a few seconds at a time, whatever. I just think it's kind of interesting the amount of data the NFL is gathering on this. And they seem to have some pretty competent people in charge, whether it's Dr. Alan Sills, who's the head of their medical program. The name of the NFLPA's medical director escapes me, but he's a really sharp dude too. And I mean, really knowledgeable. I think he was at the Pentagon, when they went through 9/11, he was the medical emergency chief there. So, some really, smart people who are in charge of all this, unlike, some of the people who are playing. That would include Melvin Gordon, who got a DUI on Tuesday night. Stayed out late, not clear what his status is going to be. Vic Fangio, the head coach, said they're going to work that out over the coming days. And there will be consequences. We'll see what happens there. Drew Lock seems likely to play. One guy who won't play though, you guys, is Dak Prescott. Anyone who was watching last weekend, certainly saw the injury, brutal compound fracture, dislocation of the ankle, had a surgery that night. The hope is he's back by the end of OTAs next year. So the Red Rifle jumps into the fray. Dallas Cowboys with Andy Dalton at the helm. Kyle, what do you think they get?
Yeah, so I think one of the, not the biggest draws, obviously Dak is incredible, but from a fantasy-specific angle, one of the nicest things about playing Dak Prescott is you were locking in league-high passing numbers instead of just raw pass attempts. Despite missing some time last week, I think he left with a few minutes left in the fourth quarter. Maybe it was like 9 if I'm trying to be specific. But despite missing a little bit of time, 222 pass attempts, I believe, is 20 more than any other quarterback. That's both because of the way they play, but also because of, most importantly, their defense just cannot stop giving up points to whoever they play. So they have to pass a lot. They don't really have a choice. You're still going to get that from a fantasy perspective with Andy Dalton because they don't have any other option to go to. So I think that's okay. It makes Andy Dalton like a streaming consideration, but he's undoubtedly an efficiency downgrade from Dak Prescott. So despite seeing a lot of volume, you could see Knox to CeeDee Lamb to Michael Gallup. I think maybe Gallup specifically would be the most hurt by this because I would think his routes are the most difficult for a quarterback to hit, going farther downfield than any of the other Dallas players. So for me, I'm actually quite concerned because we've already seen Michael Gallup get passed up on just the raw target numbers by CeeDee Lamb, even by like Dalton Schultz and Zeke. So for me, he's probably the biggest loser of this. I think Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb, because they're easier to hit in the routes they run and are seeing more targets, are safer, but they still are undoubtedly getting downgrades. And I would just like to point out that what miserable timing. Last week, I titled our show 2020 Week 5, can anything stop Dak Prescott? And of course, the one thing that could stop him was just the randomness, chaos of playing in the NFL. So I feel so bad. That has to be at least like 2% on us as a podcast. We will try not to
totally
curse
on you.
else.
I mean, maybe 1% on me, but totally on you.
Yeah, I chose the name. You guys had no choice in choosing the name, so it's actually all on me. I'm so sorry, Dak, but it is what it is.
Justin, so the issue for Andy Dalton in recent years has been the week-to-week consistency. Mm-hmm. Do we get more red rifle or do we get more red-headed stepchild?
I think you have a guy that has nothing to lose and everything to win. I mean, these are the spots, and we've seen it time and time again where next man up, right? And Andy Dalton, say what you want about him, is a seasoned NFL veteran that has had some.
Right?
Yeah, so he's had some talent around him. Primarily A.J. Green, but those were bad Bengals teams. He knows what he's doing. He's certainly competent. Bottom line is if he cannot be successful with this cast that Kyle just mentioned and arguably the best running back in the NFL, then he's terrible. But I'm not going to throw in the towel. I think there's an opportunity where he could actually thrive. Like Kyle said, I mean, they're always down. The defense is terrible. He's going to have 300-plus yard games. Because of the weaponry. Where those targets are going to go, I think Kyle's right. I think Gallup is probably the last guy out. I think that, Dalton Schultz could get leaned on like he used to throw to your boy Tyler Eifert in Cincinnati. And, but Mari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb is quickly becoming one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. If you can't get it done with this supporting cast, then you're not going to be able to do it anywhere.
So I've been looking to set lineups and stuff. And so I look at like the Bears and the Eagles and the Chiefs, and I'm wondering which of those teams I'm going to be lining up Le'Veon Bell for. Because Le'Veon Bell is no longer a New York Jet. We saw this coming. The chatter started as early as Monday that, the Jets were actively shopping him, looking to trade, unable to move him. They just moved on from him. They released him Tuesday night. Sounds like the issue was guaranteed injury guarantees, like $8 million. They're on the hook for $15 million cap hit this year, $4 million next year. They don't care. They weren't getting anything. Look, I don't know if anyone should care anything. Let me ask you this, Kyle. Is there a single guy not named Jamison Crowder that is playable on this, even when Le'Veon Bell was there?
Yeah, absolutely not. And you said it, even when Le'Veon was there. You probably shouldn't have been playing him. Jamison Crowder has vastly outperformed what you would expect from him relative to the awful situation. Props to him. I'm a little concerned about his ability to sustain it, but from what we've seen both from the volume and the efficiency, he is making the most of a bad situation in terms of the offense, the quarterback play. Nothing has been going right for him, and he still continues to ball out. So not only props to his talent, but props to the fantasy managers who have him. You're still starting him. I'm a little concerned about his ability to sustain these 100-yard games consistently, but he's getting enough volume and playing well enough that you're still playing him, and absolutely no one else. Do not play any other Jets.
Right. Joe Flacco will get the start again with Sam Darnold out of second week. All right, Justin, one team, one prediction. Where does Le'Veon Bell land?
Who wants him, right? I mean, he's a liability.
Nowhere.
He's a liability. I think that, and I tweeted this out yesterday, and I've tweeted out in the past, like, he was spoiled in Pittsburgh with a top 5 offensive line, a Hall of Fame quarterback in Ben Roethlisberger, a future Hall of Fame head coach in Mike Tomlin, and Antonio Brown was by far and away the best wide receiver in the NFL. He was a usage monster. He lived on the field. He can block, right? So any running back that can block, you're going to have a role. He was used in the passing game. But when you look at his career, I mean, welcome to reality. I mean, they're dysfunctional. The Jets are without him, with or without him. But if I'm a GM or I'm signing the checks, I look at this case, and there's been more than one, and I say, are we nuts doing this? I mean, beyond the character, I mean, is how replaceable is he? And I think the bottom line is, and we're seeing this time and time again, running backs are replaceable. So, I don't want him on my team, but I'm sure there's a team that could probably use him. And the bottom line is he's a wealthy man one way or another.
Yeah, Frank Gore and LaMichael P. Ryan next men up. Don't be surprised if any given week it was Josh Adams getting all the work done. Who knows? It's a mess. The offense. Adam Gase, offensive genius at work, people. Don't get in his way. You might be injured. Dalvin Cook has an injury. Shocking development. Was hurt in the Seattle game. Looks like they're calling it an adductor muscle at groin. It seemed down low, so that's kind of a good sign that it wasn't up in that area there where Dr. Myers in Philadelphia might need to take out the knife. It doesn't look like, but he's talked a little bit on Wednesday that he's going to be safe, be smart. They have a bye next week and then face the Packers the following week. Seems like it'd be good to give him this rest because Alexander Mattison seems to be more than capable of handling the workload. You guys, any hesitation, Kyle, putting Alexander Mattison in lineups if you have him?
No, you just jam them in. Even if they're going to lose, that's all they wanted to do is run the football. They're one of, I believe, 4 teams now, maybe 5 or 6, that are running the ball more than they are passing, and they are the only team with a less than 500 record. It's just so ingrained into the style of football they want to play. Win or lose, they're going to run, and we saw that with Madison. 20 carries, 112 yards, handful of looks as a pass catcher. Absolutely, you are just jamming him in if you are lucky enough to be holding on to him, and then after that, he probably returns to the bench.
Yeah, also they're playing the Falcons, so that helps. Davante Adams worked fully today, has had a couple weeks off, ready to roll. Tough matchup against Tampa Bay, or potentially tough matchup against Tampa Bay, Justin. Aaron Rodgers playing lights out. The chip on his shoulder continues to grow as he angrily demolishes everything in his way. How much Davante Adams will be in your lineups this week?
I think it's a good spot for him. I think there's going to be some skepticism where he had 2.5 weeks off. I think he is the highest ticketed wide receiver on the main slate on DraftKings. But boys, when he is on the field, the rapport with Aaron Rodgers is like no other. He zeroes in on him. It's 10, it's 15 targets every single week. I think if you're going to beat the Bucs, it's going to be through the air. Obviously, they've plugged the run as well as anybody, but they're going to be without Vita Vea, which is enormous. So you could see some Aaron Jones. But you're telling me Davante Adams is healthy? He's lacing him up on an already Green Bay Packers team that is a top 5 or 6 team in the NFL. Like, sign me up, and I don't think he's going to come in at a high ownership. I think he's a lock for 2025 DraftKings points if he plays most of the snaps.
I mean, he's no Robert Tonyan, but he ain't bad. It looks like Cam Newton has come off the reserve COVID list, will return to practice on Thursday is the plan. Kyle, is there a Patriot you want to play not named Cam Newton?
Yeah, I mean, before Cam Newton went out, we saw Julian Edelman was absolutely crushing, and not only was he crushing, but it was in a very un-Julian Edelman-esque way, in that he was actually leading the team in air yards. Not only was he leading, he was one of the league leaders in air yard share. Then as Cam Newton goes out, he played worse. Unsurprisingly, we saw like Demare Byrd inexplicably got 10 targets. I think things mostly returned to normal, at least the Cam Newton normal, with Newton back in the lineup. So yeah, he's only 6,500 on DraftKings. If you have him on your regular season fantasy roster, absolutely you're playing him. And I think in tournaments he's going to be pretty fairly low owned. I'm looking at a less than 5% projection. So as we get into DFS, I won't talk about him now because I've already talked about him. But yes, he's a guy I'm very interested in this week. Despite the matchup, not that it's a bad matchup in terms of the defense, I just can't see Denver doing much against this Patriots defense. I don't care. Cam Newton is just too low owned for his upside.
Interesting. So a couple of the quarterback notes before we get into the DFS portion of our evening. Baker Mayfield has some sore ribs, worked on a limited basis Wednesday. His mama didn't raise no wuss, according to Baker himself, so expect him to play. Tough matchup against the Steelers. Jarvis Landry a little nicked up too, but he's been missing some time all along. And Jimmy Garoppolo, still the starter that we know of. He worked fully today. We'll find out on coming days. It was as bad a performance as I've seen in many moons. Just bad showing his first game back, so hopefully they get that rectified. In the meantime, Raheem Mostert and George Kittle are the only startable pieces in this offense. Justin, go ahead. Tell me I'm wrong.
I think you're wrong. I think this is a spot where Deebo Samuel shows up. He gets force-fed. He owned the Arizona Cardinals last week, had a little week to get mixed back in. And the truth is, they need him. They need him. And if this team has any hope down the stretch, so I think Deebo is a name to watch. I'll be using him in certain leagues. And I think he's definitely, I mean, where else are they going to go with the football outside of George Kittle? I mean, realistically, they haven't had a wide receiver since forever that I can remember.
I will quote my Sirius XM co-host Mike Dempsey. The San Francisco passing attack does not excite me. So, and don't give that advice to your high stakes consulting guys. I don't want you losing a finger. All right, fellas, let's get into the DFS portion of the festivities. Kyle, we'll start with you at quarterback.
Yeah, for me at quarterback, I think the ownership is probably going to gravitate towards a handful of specific plays. I'm looking at ownership right now to Deshaun Watson, Lamar Jackson, and Matt Ryan as the guys over 10% owned in those double-digit ranges. If I have to pick one, it is Matt Ryan. They simply cannot stop passing. They are right now number 11 in pass rate, and they are also second in seconds per play. So they are running fast, or I guess they are throwing fast to be specific, and that is great for the stacking options between Calvin Ridley, potentially Julio Jones, tentatively, and if not, Russell Gage. So I think if I'm eating chalk, it probably goes to Matt Ryan. This Minnesota defense, I think Pro Football Focus has them ranked as the worst overall defense. A lot of that coming from their secondary that has just been ravaged and downgraded in years past. So at this point, they are one of the easy matchups to target. Matt Ryan throwing a ton. It's also run mega cold in the touchdown department. I think Todd Gurley has like 4 or 5 scores in the past 3 or 4 weeks. And Matt Ryan, the number I saw was 31 consecutive drives without a touchdown pass. And it's not like they haven't put up, it's not like they put up 0 points. It's just happened to be that Todd Gurley has been doing the scoring. If that script flips, which it did at the beginning of the year, we saw a lot of Matt Ryan to Calvin Ridley touchdowns. If that does end up reverting to what happens this game, Matt Ryan's ownership still could be too low for me. Looking down, there's a few other good plays. I like both Matthew Stafford and Gardner Minshew on both sides of a game that has a sneaky high total and isn't going to garner a lot of ownership. Both of these defenses just not looking good to start the year, and both quarterbacks certainly acceptable and fairly cheap, especially when you look at a guy like Gardner Minshew. He's only 6,400, and he has outplayed that price and outplayed his sub 10% ownership consistently this year. He's looked like a starting caliber NFL quarterback, and the stacking options become quite easy with DJ Chark out. You just play a lot of Laviska Shenault. So I think when I look at my quarterbacks, I always want to look at how am I going to play the receivers with them. When the options are easy, you just go to them. So that brings me to my last quarterback in a game that has not a great total, but I think has a chance to shoot out or at least be modestly high scoring. Chicago versus Carolina, specifically because Carolina's defense, both their corners and their run defense, is absolutely no good. Nick Foles has played fine, and he's attempted a decent amount of passes. And the stacking options, as I talked about, Allen Robinson, one of the league leaders in target share, has absolutely crushed with Nick Foles under center. 3 games, all over double-digit targets. And Darnell Mooney, out of Tulane, had a young breakout age, good college dominator, runs a 4.38. He's played on over 60% of the team snaps in 4 consecutive weeks, 5 or more targets in 3 consecutive weeks. Clearly has supplanted Anthony Miller as the number 2 and is literally minimum price on DraftKings and comes in at low ownership. I just don't get why we don't view him more like DFS players viewed Olamide Zaccheaus last week. He's going to get a decent amount of targets for essentially no price. You should be getting some Darnell Mooney if you were looking at this game.
Interesting there. Justin, do you have quarterback plays not yet mentioned?
I got a couple. I mean, I can't not envision myself playing Lamar Jackson, their favorite, on the road at Philadelphia. There's just something about the weaponry there that scares me. He has to run and really do his thing to pay off that tag, in my opinion. If I'm going to pay up, I'm still skeptical about Deshaun Watson. I mean, the matchup was there last week. He projected well. Tougher task at Tennessee. He's priced up. I mean, watch the Titans last night. They are a damn good football team, and they're a Mike Vrabel defense. I mean, this was a team that opened a lot of eyes last night. So I'm not going to go to Watson. I think Ben's fine. I'm done with Matt Ryan, and I gave him a long leash. So in that Green Bay Bucs game, it's kind of splitting hairs. I think it could shoot out. So it's gonna come down to ownership between Brady and Aaron Rodgers. But I'm going to have one of them, and I think for Rodgers, if you're going to beat the Bucs, it's going to be through the air. It's not going to be pounding the football. As far as Cam Newton, some skepticism there coming off the COVID, but it's a juicy matchup at Gillette. We love the rushing equity you can get from Newton. I think it's an affordable stack with Julian Edelman or N'Keal Harry, who I think will probably have a touchdown, 5 catches, 60 yards. They're going to try to work him in more. So I could definitely envision going to Newton. It is Wednesday. We have to keep that in mind. Like Kyle said, Gardner Minshew's in a good spot. I think Matt Stafford is in a good spot. They're both projecting really well. Will not go back to Bridgewater, but he did just about what he was projected to do last week. And again, it was against the Atlanta Falcons, so we like to pick on the Falcons. I don't see the need to pay up this week at quarterback at all. In fact, I think paying down could work out when you look at Ryan Fitzpatrick at home against the Jets. Lights out. For him to go to San Francisco and do what he did last week, 350 yards, 3 touchdowns, moving around a little bit. I mean, this guy, we talk about Frank Gore being ageless. He's right there. So I could envision using Ryan Fitzpatrick in some type of stack with Gaskin, Mike Gesicki, Devontae Parker, even Preston Williams. And then the only jet, like you mentioned, we would run it back with Jamison Crowder. So, and the last name I'll mention is Ryan Tannehill. Same price, 5,900. You're getting some rushing equity there because he's sneaky mobile. I mean, just to talk about a revitalization in a new land. I mean, this is a guy I watched struggle in Miami, and he came to Tennessee, well coached, sound running game, young pieces, great tight end, and the confidence is there. He knows what he's doing. I think there's a good spot for him to light up the Texans. So, gun to my head tonight, it's probably Aaron Rodgers up top, and then it's going to be Fitz or Ryan Tannehill.
I guess that seems reasonable enough to me. There'll be no guns to anyone's head tonight, though. We're going to be a peaceful show. I guess the one note I would say is that, watch out on Chark. That passing attack seems to struggle a little bit without him, or it's at least better with him. So running backs, Justin, all 3 of them.
All right, yeah, okay. Well, we love Aaron Jones, right? But when you watched the Packers last week, they did sprinkle in quite a bit of Jamal Williams, which is concern, right? More and more teams are doing this. It's happening. We love Aaron Jones. He gets it done in the passing game, but the reality is there's some form of committee in Green Bay going on. The Bucs are a difficult team to run on. They lost Vita Vea. That is enormous. He plugs the run. He's just a disruption up front. So that's going to hurt. There's not a better spot for Alexander Mattison if you're telling me that he gets the Dalvin Cook volume. I certainly don't like his price tag, but I get the spot. 7,200. I just don't know that I'm going there. It's the identity of their offense to run the football outside of giving it to Adam Thielen and just recently Justin Jefferson. So I get the allure with Alexander Mattison. I think it's a good bounce back spot for James Robinson. To be honest, I'm loving the volume that he got there. Has had a couple duds, but he's also shown us the upside. I think this is a good spot at home against the Lions to do that. There's 4 totals this week, boys, over 52 points. The Lions, Jags, Texans, Titans, Falcons, Vikings, Packers, Bucs. So, I mean, there's some fantasy goodness to go around. I think Miles Sanders is projecting well. And I'm trying to figure out why, because they're dogs at home. But if they can keep that game close, I think Miles Sanders is in a great spot. They've unleashed him. That's what we wanted to see. We want to see around 15, 20 touches every single week. That's what we're getting. He's 6,600. He's not going to come in at a high ownership. David Montgomery is also projecting well. It's David Montgomery, so it's tough for me to be really enthusiastic. Yeah, he's somewhat of a plotter, but we're seeing more usage in the passing game. We like that. 5,800. I think he can get me 20 points and kind of move on. The last name I'll talk about is Myles Gaskin. I mean, he's come up a little bit, but I think it's his backfield. 20 DraftKings points last week. The volume was there. 5 receptions, 16 carries against the Niners. I mean, this is a home game against the Jets. I'm going to use Fitz. I'm going to use Gaskin because of the involvement in the passing game. Probably going to use a Mike Gesicki, Parker, or Preston Williams. So love the price for Myles Gaskin. That's about as low as I'm going to go. If you tell me that Melvin Gordon is not playing tonight, I will use Royce Freeman. I think that's his job. I'll save some money there. If they can keep the game close, I'm getting 20 touches out of Royce Freeman at 4K. I think sign me up. Buddy Brad Evans was on him, in love with him. We just really haven't seen a huge amount of Royce Freeman. So number of options in the middle that I did not mention, like the Mike Davises of the world, priced up. We know he's in the McCaffrey role, but don't like the price, and the price is really important. I'm not going to be mad at you for using Ronald Jones, even if Leonard Fournette plays, but he's also priced up. So, and look, guys, look at Todd Gurley. I mean, this has been fantastic. You're a fan of the NFL, and you're a Falcons fan, which I'm sorry for you for numerous reasons. You're going to be happy with what you're seeing out of Todd Gurley. So that's my list of running backs. There's a lot of them. It's Wednesday. More decisions will be made at the end of the week.
I'll make sure to let Evans know that you threw out that receipt on Royce Freeman for him. I'm sure he'll appreciate it.
He mentioned it on our show.
Yes, as did I. Kyle, give me some winning running backs.
Yeah, I would say one Justin names that I would just caution on is Royce Freeman, specifically because Philip Lindsay is expected to return, and Royce Freeman has been unused his entire career. I don't think anything changes if Philip Lindsay does return. That is the expectation, so not going to see much Royce Freeman in my lineups. Another player you won't see, I'll give you one more fade before I talk about my favorite play. Derrick Henry averaging 1.5 carries per game. We saw, he did find the end zone. I guess at this point it's last night. When you're listening to this, it'll be 2 days ago or maybe even later. But he didn't hit the 100 yards. He hasn't been quite as explosive as he was last year in terms of breaking long runs because he has no involvement. 1.5 catches per game, just a handful of targets on the year. It is really difficult for him to absolutely smash and hit his ceiling because you need both 100 yards and 2 touchdowns on DraftKings for him to hit 25, 30 points, whereas Mike Davis is the most used back in terms of pass catching outside of Alvin Kamara. If you're going to get Christian McCaffrey at 7K and less ownership than Derrick Henry, I make that pivot 10 times out of 10. Mike Davis, specifically on DraftKings where you're more incentivized to target these pass catching backs, Mike Davis is simply just a 3-down back. No Reggie Bonifant means they literally have no usable backup on this team. It's going to be a mix of Curtis Samuel, maybe Alex Arma. I think it's just a fullback. Mike Davis, the best chalk of the slate. I think it is accurate to see him at 20+% owned. Would easily take him over Derrick Henry. 2 more names, kind of ugly, not very household names. David Montgomery and Myles Gaskin. I just think, Justin talked about these guys. They're getting a lot of looks in the passing game. Myles Gaskin, dating back to his first game on this team, was getting looks as a pass catcher and now has completely taken over as the primary running back. He makes a great stack with his team's defense. Miami facing the Jets, the awful lowly Jets that we talked about. I think this is a really easy option to pay $5,400 for a back who's going to be cheaper, or he's going to be the same price as David Johnson, but gives you a solid discount on ownership. I think he's just one of the best points per dollar plays on the slate and isn't going to be owned like it. And David Montgomery, Justin said, with Tariq Cohen out, we've seen 90 receiving snaps in the past 3 games. We saw 8 targets in the previous week and 6 targets in the week before that. Those were both career highs. Sets back-to-back career highs as a receiver, at least in terms of the volume he saw. There's not really going to be any changing that, and he plays in a game that I actually think I'm interested in stacking, as I talked about before. So in terms of 3 backs I really like, those are my 3 guys. Derrick Henry would be my big fade of the week.
Look at you go. Give me the wide receivers that we must have in lineups.
Yeah, at wide receiver, because I talked about Matt Ryan, have to talk about Calvin Ridley. If Julio Jones is out, Calvin Ridley is a fringe cash play. I know he's expensive, but I'm okay paying that, and he's not going to be incredibly high owned. I'm looking at less than 15% ownership. That still makes him one of the more popular plays, but he's sitting right now as a fringe top 5 owned play, and we're going to get more ownership on guys like Adam Thielen, like Terry McLaurin. I think, like I talked about with Mike Davis, there are certain plays where the chalk is accurate. Last week, that was Robbie Anderson and Darius Slayton who both got there. This week, I think Calvin Ridley is that guy, $7,800. But frankly, that price is warranted against this terrible Minnesota defense. I don't even think if Julio Jones plays, you have to shy away from the expensive Jones-Ridley stack, because Julio Jones, this has to be the first time in years, is going to be under 7K. You can get a 6.7K Julio Jones. Obviously, this is only if he plays, but man, at that price, I get that he carries a ton of re-injury risk, probably more so mid-game injury risk than any other player on the main slate. But the ownership is going to be sub 10% on a guy who we know has 150, 200-yard upside in his career, multiple touchdowns potentially. I don't see how you don't go to Julio Jones. I think this is just the most obvious tournament play, both because it is comically you could play him in a GPP type of play because he totally can go out and get you 0. He can also go out and get you 30. And I think anytime you have that kind of upside at the cheap price and at the ownership, Julio Jones is a great play if he ends up being active. If not, you just plug in Russell Gage and you double stack Matt Ryan. I think on the other side of the ball, Adam Thielen's ownership is a bit too much. You could potentially make the pivot to Justin Jefferson, but there's actually another pivot as we get into tight ends that I'll talk about a little bit more. So moving off of that game, I think it's my favorite place to target, but Julian Edelman, as I said, with the Cam Newton stacks, the air yard share was just too incredible, as was the target share, to pass up on him in my Cam Newton stacks. And he's kind of the one scenario where I feel you can single stack a quarterback. We have had 5 Millie Maker, DraftKings Millie Maker contests, one for each week. Every single one has featured a quarterback double stacked with 2 receivers, except last week it was a receiver and a tight end in Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce. it seems pretty clear to me that the evidence points to you just need a crazy amount of correlation to get all 90th percentile plus outcomes. So I am looking to double stack. I think N'Keal Harry would be the guy, although maybe you could look to Damiere Byrd. Julian Edelman, though, is just the primary option when you look at that. Lastly, if I'm looking to get a little bit different, I think Marvin Jones is interesting. He's going to be under 5% owned. He has run a route on every single Matthew Stafford dropback, and the production simply hasn't been there. He's had a bunch of terrible games. I think last week he had like under 2 points. He absolutely is going to be low owned because of that, but he's going to be on the field for almost every single snap, somewhere around, I believe, a 94.9, 95% snap share. Like I said, running all of these routes. At some point, that either has to come back, or they probably just take him off the field if he's never able to get open. So given the fact that they are still using him like a starting receiver, I'm going to treat him like a starting receiver, get 5,100. That seems like a bit of a discount on a guy in a great game environment. Detroit versus Jacksonville, a high total. I think he makes sense with Kenny Golladay and Matthew Stafford stack. So I like Golladay. I think Jones really makes the Stafford stack unique, and I don't think it'll be highly owned relative to like the kind of obvious Matt Ryan, Calvin Ridley type of stack.
Yeah, a little buzz about Jones this weekend are certainly getting him back on track, and the numbers underneath seem good. Justin, wide receivers, sir.
I mentioned Davante Adams earlier. I think you got to plug him in, and I don't know that he's going to come in at a high ownership. Kyle mentioned Calvin Ridley and Thielen. Boom goes the dynamite, right? With these two, if they go off in a total in a shootout like this looks like it's going to be, I'm going to use them both. Use Calvin Ridley, run it back with Adam Thielen. You're talking potentially 60 DraftKings points right there. I mean, they're both going to be targeted 10, 12 times. Adam Thielen's had back-to-back 29-point DraftKings weeks. I mean, it's just, he's the identity of the offense outside of Dalvin Cook. We're seeing a little Justin Jefferson. We need to see more. Agree with Kyle in regards to Allen Robinson. Force-fed. This is what happened last year. We're seeing it again. Doesn't matter who the quarterback is. They just heave it to him. 16 targets last week, 10 the week before, and 13 week 3. So give me some Allen Robinson, 7K. Little priced up. He's more of a 6,500 guy for me, but I get it. I will probably go there. Question marks with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers wide receivers and Evans, and we hope to see Chris Godwin. Godwin plays. It's probably going to make me go lean towards Tom Brady a little more. I think that without Godwin, we're seeing that. I mean, they're a good offense, but they're not the great offense that we envision them to be. So give me a healthy Chris Godwin, in a healthy Mike Evans. Everybody's hurt. Let's face it. It's Wednesday. It's a maintenance day. So everybody's got the Q tag. But if they're both playing, Brady is his ceiling. He showed it against the Chargers. He can go off at any moment. So I'll have some Tom Brady with Godwin and Mike Evans. Odell Beckham. Oh, actually, real quick, Will Fuller, I think, is in a spot. Kyle's boy, he's priced up too, but we're waiting for that Will Fuller game, clinging on to like that 50 burger he had last year. And I could definitely see myself using Will Fuller or Brandon Cooks in a stack against my Brian Tannehill, AJ Brown, or Jonnu Smith type of stack. So I'm definitely going to have pieces of that game there for certain. Odell Beckham at 6,400 in a game where the Browns are probably going to be down. They're definitely going to be down. It's in Pittsburgh, 6,400. We saw him against the Cowboys a couple of weeks ago doing Odell Beckham things. We just want to see more of it. They're winning, which is good. So the motivation's there. I can see this being an Odell Beckham game, 25 DraftKings points, and we move on. You scroll down a little bit, and you're getting into that Devontae Parker, Kenny Golladay, Crowder range. I like them all. I think Devontae Parker's a guy where, he can show up, he can go away. So he's definitely not a cash game play for me, but I get it. And I think if Ryan Fitzpatrick rolls, it's usually with Devontae Parker, although we're seeing some Preston Williams. So he's spreading it around. And I will use Jamison Crowder in that stack as well. Kyle's right as far as Justin Jefferson. I think he's a smart pivot off of Adam Thielen. If you were to fade Adam Thielen and play Justin Jefferson, you will catapult to the top of GPP leaderboards. Terry McLaurin is another guy. Love the price, love the spot. Go right back to him. Another guy, force-fed, 10, 12 targets, 25, 26, 30-point upside potentially. So give me some Terry McLaurin. I mean, this is the position where we can just take all week to make the decisions. I think it comes down to ownership percentage. You look at Chase Claypool, what he did last week, people are going to flock to him. And they're going to forget that Juju Smith-Schuster's on the team. And so is Deontay Johnson, who looks like he's going to play. So I will not be going back there, but I get why you would be. I mentioned Preston Williams on the cheap, probably go there, and N'Keal Harry. No, that's as low as I'm going. Although, gentlemen, I'll throw a name at you. Travis Fulgham, I mean, bad spot this week, but would you go back to him? 10 receptions last week, $152 and a TD. I mean, is he the only option for Carson Wentz outside of like Zach Ertz? I mean, could you go back to him? Or does this seem like what happened last week was an anomaly.
Oh man, that is a great way to lead into me saying, no, I'm probably not going to Travis Fulgham. I don't think I'm going to any Philly players. Like Carson Wentz had probably, I would say, even though they lost, it might have been his best game of the year last week because he's played so poorly. He actually played all right. Wasn't perfect, but it was all right against a solid Pittsburgh defense. I think he threw 2 interceptions, but one of them was like a Hail Mary, essentially. Shouldn't have, doesn't count in terms of what you're looking at when you watch the game. But no, I'm just not really looking to get into the low implied team total of Philly. Their offense has been, productive in spurts, but has largely struggled throughout the year. So for me, no, I'm not going to him. Maybe the only thing you could say, though, is that I say that, but then who are they going to throw to? Because I think Zach Ertz has just been terrible this year. My God, 4.1 yards per target. I know we've seen some focus on the coverage, but good players beat tight coverage all the time. Literally all of the top options. We talk about DeAndre Hopkins played well against Jalen Ramsey whenever they used to face off. Amari Cooper got 10 targets against Jalen Ramsey at the beginning of the year. It certainly is just the fact of the game that the best players are going to beat tough matchups. Zach Ertz hasn't even beaten bad matchups. He's been outright bad, and he's been out-targeted by guys who are practice squad players or AAF players. And Travis Fulgham being on, I think it was the Lions and then the Packers, I believe, practice squads, and Greg Ward playing for, I don't know, Arizona Hotshots. I don't remember what team he played for. But these guys have all out-targeted him, and he's been incredibly inefficient. So maybe that means I probably should have a little bit of consideration on Fulgham. Either that, or I just think the Baltimore defense annihilates, which could happen. But, I got to say, they have to throw to somebody. And at this point, I don't think it's Zach Ertz.
6 targets for us last week, the 1 catch. Richard Rodgers had as many catches on 1 target. So, and just I thought it was interesting. Saturday night, the Football Die Hard show on SiriusXM, NFL and Fantasy Sports Radio. It's a simulcast, people. You could listen to it. We were covering the Eagles-Steelers game. We had beat writers from covering both teams on. We had Jeff Mosher from NBC Philly and NBC Sports Philly and asked him, I was kind of working that Eric Ebron, hey, this looks like a great matchup. Who is this the guy we should watch? He goes, nope, it's Claypool. That's the guy that's going to destroy him. Just right out of nowhere. Just said it Saturday night. Then we had Dale Lally on from DK Pittsburgh Sports, and he said, hey, I heard what Mosher was saying. He's totally right, man. Claypool's the guy tomorrow. And so all my Ebron shares wept. And I'll say this, Ben Roethlisberger said at one point, this one touchdown would have normally gone to Ebron, but he was covered and Claypool was open. So, don't know that I want to chase those points every week. But not bad if you want to jump in the Claypool. All right, Justin, give me all 900 tight ends, that you have on your list.
Yeah. And just to piggyback on Claypool is one of these guys in a deep wide receiver class. We just kind of got lost in the shuffle. We knew the talent, big bodied guy out of Notre Dame, and he ended up in a crowded place. But man, open some eyes. It is a special rookie wide receiver class. Keep cracking on Mark Andrews, and he keeps proving me wrong. 17 DraftKings points last week, 20 the week before. The targets were up, but they're all over the place. I just don't go there, and every time I don't go there, which is often, it bites me. So I'm not going to go there again. I think I'll have a little Mike Gesicki. I don't love the price at 5,500. I can spend my money elsewhere, but he's showed us the upside. He showed us he's one of Ryan Fitzpatrick's favorite targets. You're not breaking the bank. I get it in the stack. I got to figure out what I'm going to do with that Fitzpatrick stack. Jonnu Smith, again, when you look at his stat line, 21 DraftKings points last week, the targets are there. The touchdowns, 5 touchdowns this season, a fixture in this Titans offense. It's a part of what they do. I mean, you get the impression now they run the football. A.J. Brown is back. There's your wide receiver, and you got a top 10 tight end that you give him. It's pretty cut and dry and a damn good defense. So Smith's in play certainly at 5,200 in my Texans stack. Scroll down with Kyle as far as Zach Ertz. What a sad story that has become. But the older we get, These names start to fade away. He appears to be one of them. One name in the by the way, your boy Logan Thomas is projecting well this week. It's kind of off him at this point. We're clinging on to what he did week 1. It's now week 6. I like the price. I will not be going there. If Mo Alley-Cox does not play this week, I'm going to use Trey Burton. Trey Burton, the former Philadelphia Eagle, we were hoping to see flourish in Chicago. Did not work. Now all of a sudden he's in Indianapolis. 5 receptions last week, 6 targets, no Mo Alley-Cox. We know Phillip Rivers loves to use his tight ends. He is not Antonio Gates. But he's fine at 3,100. So I could definitely see myself paying for Trey Burton against the Cincinnati Bengals at home. See a mediocrity play right there, bottom of the barrel. But I'm confident enough that he'll see 5 or 6 targets, and that's really all I'm expecting. 10, 12, 15 DraftKings points, and you're loving it. So Smith, Gesicki, and Trey Burton right now. It's a short list, and it is only Wednesday. We'll have to see. Darren Fells is another guy that I could see getting involved, but not enough consistency.
Yeah, it seems like somebody for the Titans or the Texans is going to fare well, and it just seems like whoever's in there. Kyle, your tight ends.
Yeah, assuming Jordan Akins comes back, I actually kind of like him because up until he suffered what I believe was a concussion, he was dominating receiving snaps. Darren Fells was just a blocker and got a little bit of red zone work. And we saw him break away the long catch, but I assume they will just resume the status quo of Jordan Akins being their pass catching down tight end and Darren Fells being a blocker. And his size, he's like 6'7" and real thick, so it does give him a bit of an advantage in the red zone. But largely, Jordan Akins still being the guy if he does end up suiting up, and concussions typically aren't long-term injuries. So assuming we see him, I think he's a fine play, especially if you want to try and get your Deshaun Watson stacks a little different. But a guy I'm looking to is Irv Smith Jr. Had his best game of the season on, what was that, Sunday night, I assume, or Monday night? I don't know. Now we have too many primetime game slates that I don't even know which ones are which anymore with 4 of them. So, yeah, I know. Oh, man. So, Tuesday nights, man, really killing all my data gathering and trying to create content on a timely structure. It's killing me. But, yeah. So, anyway, Irv Smith has his highest snap total over 50, and I believe his highest snap share as well at 68% of the season. We saw last year there was a stretch where he started getting more and more involved and then just completely cut out. I'm not entirely sure what they're doing with him, but they just can't keep trotting out the corpse of Kyle Rudolph. At some point, Irv Smith has to take over. Did we see that last week? Potentially. I'm not sure I can say with any confidence that we saw the Irv Smith takeover start, but it was his best game of the year in terms of basically all receiving metrics, but the target specifically is what you want to look at. Best game of the year in terms of targets. I know they run a lot, but he's only 2,500. He's minimum price on DraftKings, so you don't need a ton of volume to get there. And interestingly, this slate I think is horrible for tight end. The chalk projects to be Zach Ertz, who I've already talked to death about. Evan Ingram, who if he doesn't get a rushing touchdown last week, is just a complete bust. Jonnu Smith, who, if he doesn't run purer than God on touchdowns, he's 17th in targets among tight ends. They just don't want to utilize any of their pass catchers. They want to utilize Derrick Henry on the ground. So I don't feel great about the chalk. I think this is one of the more inefficient slates in terms of tight end pricing and the ownership as it goes towards pricing. So I'm fine with just punting on Irv Smith. We even saw on slates where tight ends got 0. The punt plays got 0. Specifically, Adam Troutman, I think 2 weeks ago now, and Robert Tonyan week 1. You could still build winning lineups because it lets you play the good plays. And, it got you off some other, more expensive, but still almost as bust-prone tight ends. So if I think all the expensive guys are bad, I'm just going to punt for half of the price of Zach Ertz. Irv Smith is an infinitely better play, and he's also going to be low-owned. So I like that play. Don't hate Jordan Akins. I think if I am going to go with a little chalkier play, Logan Thomas at 3,300, here we go again meme, because he's going to be sub 10% ownership. A lot of tight ends have that claim this week, but he does have a good projection at 3,300. I'm not sure what this passing game looks like. We saw Alex Smith get in, but I do believe Kyle Allen was announced as the starter. Neither are great options. Alex Smith, congratulations on the comeback, but didn't look great. They check down to their running backs a lot. It's simply that at 3,300, if you're going to see the targets he does, back-to-back games of 4 targets, went, I believe, 7, 8, and 9 in a different order in the first 3 games. He's a decent pseudo-punt play. I don't love tight end this week, so that basically just has me playing the cheap guys and hoping that they produce similar bad lines to the expensive guys.
Don't like tight ends or the corpses of tight ends. Kyle is corpsist. Now we know it all. All right, Kyle, what's your favorite defense this week?
Yeah, so my favorite defense is the Miami defense. I simply think they just didn't get the appropriate price jump, which was kind of surprising to me, given that they get the GOAT matchup right now. Other defenses I think are at least worth considering. You know, I've got some interest, a little bit of passing interest in the Bengals defense. Certainly not a defense I'm targeting because of their talent, but no defense is garnering a ton of ownership. They are not among those that are garnering at least, like, they're not really even projecting for much more than 5%. And they talk about corpses. They faced the dusty old corpse of Phillip Rivers, who has just looked completely, not even lost. I don't think he has it anymore. He hasn't looked good. Their offense wants to run through the runs. That does give you maybe a potential floor of just they can't put up a ton of points. They choose not to. So I don't love the talent, but at 2,100 facing Phillip Rivers, I think that is certainly a spot I can get myself into.
All right, Justin, your defensive choice?
That is classic. I'm going to play the Bengals defense, but not because of their talent. I'm with you on the Miami Dolphins. Brian Flores defense, they're doing a little of this, they're doing a little of that, and they get a dreamy matchup at home against the Jets. I am right there, Kyle. I'm glad you said the Dolphins because it confirmed it. Gentlemen, we take this position for granted. I know Kyle likes to pay down. A lot of people like to pay down, but it can hurt you. I used Miles Sanders this week, correlated it with the Eagles defense, did not work out in my favor. You can get a -1. You can get a 1. You can get a 2. If you're going to win a tournament, you better have massive ceiling games from everyone and to afford to have a 0. So I'm usually aiming, and I say this time and time again, 6, 8. I'm very happy if I get 10 points and then you move on. So it's a position where, yeah, you can just kind of, but it can hurt you. So I never try to find myself making foolish decisions, but the reality is there's some bad defenses in the NFL that do not create plays, and you don't want to get stuck with one of them. If I'm going to pay up, it's going to be the Colts. I mean, they're doing it at every level. They've showed us upside against the Jets, 26 points week 3, doing a little of this, a little of that. They're good up front. Their secondary is surprisingly better. I mean, they're a well-coached football team. So 4K, love them at home against the rookie Joe Burrow, who's going to make mistakes. He can throw a pick 6, I think, as well as anybody can at this point in time. 4K, I'm not going to go to 4,500 with the Ravens. I think that's foolish once you start spending that kind of money. But comfortable with the Indianapolis Colts, and I'm definitely comfortable with the Miami Dolphins at home against Joe Flacco. I think the price is right. I think they can get 8 to 10 points, and then we move on.
That sounds pretty reasonable to me. Should be an exciting, interesting week. In case you haven't been paying attention, there are teams on buys. Don't play those teams. They won't help you. Seattle Chargers, New Orleans Saints. Who was the other one?
Oh God, dude, the schedule's changing and sites.
I know the Raiders.
Okay, yes, the site's not updated.
Successful
has been
Las Vegas Raiders. So get those guys out of your lineups right now. Watch the main page of the website for news and information relevant to the rest of the games being played, the injured players who are likely to play in those games or not. And we'll roll on through and help you win a little more money. We'll be back to do it again next week. Justin?
Yeah, guys, this is another great show. It's week 6. Again, I can't believe it's week 6, but enjoy it. Enjoy your rosters. Tread lightly with defenses because they can hurt you. And, we'll talk to you guys next week. Kyle, you want to wrap us up?
Yeah, everyone, thanks for tuning in. I think we covered it well. Check out the site. Check out us on Twitter. Find me at Kyle Tweets here, Justin at Justin Lonero, and Bob. Is it Justin Lonero, right? Just Justin Lonero, the basics, the bread and butter, and Bob at Football Die Hard. We will catch you guys next week.